Hi, Mr. Hines. So I read So You Want to Talk About Race, and I'm doing the video lesson on it, and I'll just start. An important thing learned from the book So You Want to Talk About Race is the fact that I already knew, but I got more of a deeper understanding. Race is not just a person or a group of persons being mean and making harsh statements and gestures. Racism is any prejudice against someone because of their race, when those views are reinforced by systems of power. So one of the things that the book taught me is the model minority myth. This is the idea that there's a minority group that is higher than or supposed to be looked up upon by lower minority groups. The model minority group is Asians, but it's not that simple. The model minority myth might seem something to be happy about, but really all it does is silence the oppression and racism in the AAPI population, the Asian American and Pacific Islander. People assume that it's a good thing, but overshadows the voices of Pacific Islanders, Hawaiians, Guamanian, Tongan, Fijian, Samoan, and Marshallese people when talking about Asian Americans. The Asians that are left out of the equation have a poverty rate that exceeds the Hispanic and Black populations. They are massive targets of systemic racism as well. When it comes to jobs, they have very low luck and they suffer similar to Hispanic and Black groups. The model minority myth is a toxic idea that is woven into the cloth of America along with deep-rooted racist beliefs and systemic racism. Another thing that I learned is how to talk about race. I am half Black and I talk about race with my friends that are of different descent. And I think no matter what race you are, you should know how to talk about it because you can still offend people based on how you talk about it. So basically, in the book, there is a chapter called What If I Talk About Race Wrong? And at the end of the book, she gives you a list of things to do. And I thought this is just important to bring up. State your intentions. When she says that, she means talk about what you are trying to get out of this conversation. And another important thing that I learned is that a lot of Black people end up being almost like dictionaries or encyclopedias for other races when talking about race because they don't completely understand what it's like to be them. So they want to get a deeper understanding. But in the end, instead of having a conversation, they ask all the questions and then the Black people give all the answers, which it's very defeating to some Black people. Second, remember what your top priority in the conversation is and don't let your emotions override that. When talking about race, some people can get very heated because it is a sensitive subject to some people, and not everyone talks about it in the right ways, which is why if you start to get defensive, you can lose what point you were trying to make, and then the whole argument or conversation was almost pointless. Do your research. When you're going to talk about race, people should know what they're talking about and not just make assumptions, and they need to know what they're saying. Don't make your anti-racism argument oppressive against other groups. So, when people get frustrated, they could bring other groups and almost bring them down, which is not okay, because you are just reinforcing racism in another way. When you start to feel defensive, stop and ask yourself why. When people get defensive, the conversation spirals and becomes almost pointless, which is why you need to keep a cool head and no matter what, know what you're trying to say and get to that point. Do not tone police. When she says do not tone police, she means don't make the conversation more comfortable to you. You need to understand everything, and just because it might be uncomfortable to you doesn't mean that it shouldn't be talked about. So don't censor certain things because it makes you uncomfortable. If you're a white, watch how many times you say I and me. Because systemic racism and racism is such a big thing and not a lot of people understand it, it's important not to make the whole argument about yourself when talking about it with a minority if you're white. Because that is what happens a lot and it defeats the purpose. Ask yourself, am I trying to be right or am I trying to do better? The difference of trying to be right and trying to do better is when you try to be right, you're trying to prove a point. When you try and be better, you're trying to change yourself and your views or someone else's views. By being right, it could result in being defensive and the argument being pointless. Do not force people of color into discussions of race. People of color live with racism every single day. And sometimes they don't feel like talking about it, which is perfectly okay. And I think that is a very important lesson and thing you should keep in mind when talking about race, no matter who you are. Because people who experience it every day don't always want to talk about it because it can be very painful and it is an extremely sensitive subject to some people. This is only a bit of all the important lessons in this book, which is why I recommend it for everyone to read. This is no matter who you are, because it benefits all. Thank you. That is the end of my lesson. I hope you are safe. Thank you.